The opinions expressed here are those of the individual participants. Prairie Coast Community Radio takes no position on issues discussed in this program.
Hi, I'm Candice Michel, and this is Our Community. We're approaching this administration's 100th day in power, and some of the things that we're seeing are almost unbelievable. Certainly, if you had asked me a year ago if my country would fire thousands upon thousands of government workers, would pick a fight with Canada, align with the brutal Russians against the victim Ukraine, and deport 2-year-old American citizens, I would have laughed in your face. Not my country, not the United States of America. We are a country founded on the rule of law. Each person on our soil is entitled to due process. And yet each day is another deep dive into authoritarianism and a little bit of insanity. For the past several weeks, I've invited some friends to discuss the most recent recklessness and stripping us of our basic rights under our Constitution. And of course, the almighty DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. What a joke. Anyway, today I want to take a look at some of the actual harm being done to real people in our community by the actions of this administration. I'm joined by Diana Carter and Sean Cosgrove. Diana, as you know, is the executive director of Brookings CORE Response, a nonprofit organization that's been working with many of the vulnerable people in our area for the past 4 years? Has it been close to 5?
As an agency, 4 years, but in total, almost, 5.
It's amazing how fast time is. Yeah. And she helps them obtain services, provides supplies, helps them find housing. Sean Cosgrove is a National Forest Service ranger who works on our trails and rivers in the wilderness, helping to keep our wild lands pristine and accessible. Welcome to the show, both of you. It's so nice to see your faces.
You too.
Friendly faces on the other side of the table.
Been a minute.
It has been, I know. It has been a while since you've been here, Diana. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that all of the insanity and upheaval is taking its toll, not just on you personally, but on your staff, on your clients, on the organization as a whole. I mean, when I heard the news that the funding was frozen, though after the first few days.
That was the first day.
That was the first
January
day.
21st, yeah.
So that must have been horrific.
Well, it was, it was quite a shock because, as most people who are in agencies know, or at least who lead agencies know, when there's a cut in funding or there's a change in programming, that is typically between 1 year to 2 years out, and so you have time to prepare. Even you might find out 6 months before, or at the very least a few months, but nobody's ever had that kind of change in a day. So that I think was why it was so shocking for everybody. And we were out on pit count at the time we heard it. So we were literally out doing outreach, and there wasn't a lot we could do. I was able to reach out to some of our funders, the state, and try to get some clarification for the first 24 hours. And kind of the word that we heard back was if that funding freeze had stayed in place, that our agency would have lost all but a small amount of funding. And we would have lost all of our programs except for the low-income housing.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it is insane.
And it would have been just like that, right? Like a knife.
Like Monday is when we heard, Tuesday is when we got clarification, and we would have had to inform staff on Wednesday. But luckily, Tuesday afternoon, they paused it, or, there was a stay order, or whatever it was. So, but by Tuesday, I went home thinking that I was going to have to wake up and tell staff the next day. So yeah, it was pretty, and I'm not, wasn't the only one. And for sure, there are other agencies where that's actually impacted them financially already. There's a lot of agencies that are still seeing funding freezes and funding cuts because obviously there's a lot of legal cases going on right now related to those freezes. And I think the Supreme Court just ruled that it was unconstitutional, so they had to reinstate some of the funds, but they're finding other ways to cut those funds and cut programs. So I just heard last week, or maybe it was this week, that Fair Housing Council of Oregon is losing like half of their funding. So I have no idea what their status is.
Wow.
And that's just one. I mean, there's hundreds of agencies that I'm connected with that are reporting funding loss and reporting programs closing, and some of them are just dissolving. So it definitely has a real effect, even though I think people here are not necessarily feeling the pinch. We will.
Not yet.
Because we're seeing the writing on the wall as an agency. So it's going to be felt here locally. And, there's definitely a lot we're going to be going into. But I think talking about social safety nets is probably important right now because of, especially in an area like us where we don't have a lot of safety net. We're just sort of building that in. Like, we're still pulling people out of the river. We haven't even built enough infrastructure to go upriver and find out why they're falling in. So for our community, that is a big hit, bigger than I think most people realize. So.
And the thing about the Supreme Court, I mean, it's nice to say that they ruled such and such, but he's ignoring it. The administration absolutely ignores.
Which is different than, previous administrations. And, I don't agree with issues from all the administrators. There's always issues that I don't agree with. And so it really, it does matter who's in charge. But at this point, that's not the key issue here. The key issue is how quickly everybody's moving, how much ambiguity there is. And so even us as an agency, and myself, I think about it all the time. My staff thinks about it all the time. And you can't not talk about it because it just makes it worse. So, we've had to talk about it several times as an agency with our board and staff.
Yep.
So everybody's feeling, it's sort of like when COVID hit and, when people were struggling, you couldn't really reach out to other people because everybody was struggling, globally, which is a totally different kind of trauma than when you have a personal trauma. When you can't reach out to anyone, I think we talked about this several years ago on this show that the help needs help at some point. And so I know for myself, it's a constant state of dread, wondering what's going to happen and when the shoe's going to drop. And so if I'm feeling that way, I'm sure all the other agencies are as well.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the point, actually,
I think so.
To make it as uncomfortable for people as possible. And it certainly is. I mean, there is this constant sort of sense of anxiety and dread. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen the next day. And,
to a certain extent, as a nonprofit, some of that's normal. No, not knowing, are we going to get this grant? Is this program sustainable? Which is a joke in the nonprofit world because nothing's sustainable, but stable, I guess, somewhat stable. And so, we always have to contend with that, which is why for us as an agency, we've built in so many different funding streams to be able to lean back and forth depending on where the funding is and what the needs are. But to have it all hit at once was sort of a wake-up call. So I think that's why, the ambiguity, the speed at which they're moving, the intent to make us feel the anxiety, and then just sort of how much is impacted all at once.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I want to come back and talk a little bit about the whole safety net thing, because that's like across the board at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are being affected. Sean, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you went through, because you're one of those great park rangers, which I just think is so stinking cool. What a great job that is.
It is. It is.
So what do you do? What's your day like when you're working?
Well, so I'm labeled as a forestry technician, but I'm more river and trails. Like that's kind of what I was hired for.
And so your job is to keep those trails
right. So
clean?
So we maintain existing trails and create new when possible.
Okay. And are the new trails for people, or are they primarily for firefighting? I mean, what are...
It's all for people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good. And so when you go out, you're like going out into the wild.
Right. Yeah. We normally do 3 or 4 days out.
Wow. Wow. And kind of camp out there?
Like on the project, whatever the project is.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll do 8 days on and 8 days off.
Wow.
Or we have a big project that we're trying to finish.
Right. So you must have to bring your equipment in with you.
Yeah.
And if you're going in,
Yeah,
I'm thinking it's like in backpacks or
It
something,
is.
right?
That's a whole story because, we've come, I don't know, full circle, so to say, of under the FDR administration of being fully funded, fully staffed, to now it's bare bones, skeleton crews, no funding.
And has that been that way for a while, or is it?
Yeah.
It must be getting worse.
Yeah, it really started with Reagan.
Oh,
He started the cuts of
really
permanent staff, and then the cuts of funding for public land agencies, and it's just been downhill ever since. And the Republican Party has co-opted that. They're the ones that have basically continued that tradition that Reagan started.
I find it really difficult to understand, right? Because those lands are so beautiful and so wonderful. And why wouldn't you want your people to be able to get out and enjoy them? I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if they're trying to take the timber, or if they're trying to use them.
Well, so this would be my personal opinion, but since I've been in it since 2017, essentially I've got like a front row seat to just how bad it is. And also the tactics that the Republican Party has actually been using or currently using of taking what was formerly public lands that could never be sold. It's protected under federal protections that you can't sell public lands. You can lease it, but you can't sell it. And so Republicans have been finding a way to get around that and actually sell public lands to industry, to private industry, for basically to make money off.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No.
So during this whole, crazy stuff that started happening on January 20th, did you get fired? Did you lose your job?
I did. Yeah. The Valentine's Day massacre.
Is that when it was, huh?
It
Valentine's
was,
Day.
or close to it.
Yeah.
Sort of
It was on Valentine's.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh my God. So did you get any kind of a warning?
None at all.
Did anybody talk to you personally?
My district ranger called me,
Okay.
and informed me that I was fired.
But it obviously wasn't because of anything you had done or hadn't done.
Right. Well, the paperwork, the actual official Forest Service paperwork read out that I was being released because I didn't have a satisfactory spacing out right now.
Job performance?
Yeah, it's a evaluation. I forget what it's called now. But
how is that even? It's not true.
Right. It was a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. How can they do that?
Yeah.
Fired for cause.
Right.
Because he's not doing his job.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of the story of the Trump administration, right?
Yeah,
Of just one lie after the next.
Insane.
No, I couldn't just fire a bunch of my staff and say it's for performance, because it would be clear and obvious, firing everybody all at once and saying any HR investigation would immediately, reveal that was
because you couldn't have actually looked at all of the cases.
Well, and some of them, my understanding is some of them didn't have performance reviews yet, so
Right.
not sure
exactly.
how that even would happen.
So you got your job back, right?
I did because
How long were you out of
it was about
commission?
2 months.
Really?
Well, it happened in February, and then you were supposed to go back in March, but you didn't end up back until April?
Yeah.
Early April.
Wow.
So,
So is it secure now?
Nope.
is anything?
Nope. Their next tactic is they did that through the OMB
Right.
Office Management Budget,
Yeah.
which was the illegal part because OMB has no jurisdiction other than their own agency to hire or fire any other employees from any separate agencies.
Yeah.
So now they're doing they're already laying the plans out. It's called reduction in force.
Yep. Riffs.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's going to be within the agency, so it can seem as if it's legal,
And yet we all know.
Right.
Right. We all know. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Right. Yeah.
In what universe?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the billions of dollars they have already spent firing, trying to rehire, fill the positions that it's dangerous to not have people. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Well, and just talking about from the efficiency standpoint, the amount of money that our forests and our parks bring in, as opposed to how much we spend on them, is monumental. So you're not spending money on federal workers; you're saving money by employing federal workers to manage the land. So there is no efficiency there.
No, no, there's no understanding there. I mean, that's just stupidity, really, to not understand it. And it's the same with the IRS, right? The IRS is the money-making machine of the
And they're
US
already
government.
efficient.
Yeah.
Very efficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we hold them to a high standard.
Yes. But no. Let's fire them all. I know. It's insane. And you'd think that if you were going to be doing this crazy stuff across the board and making people uncomfortable and all of that, if you left them their parks so that they had a way to escape reality and go out and be in their parks, if you just left the parks alone, you could probably manage the population a little bit better. But there's just like the cognitive dissonance is like, what?
Well, it's really like tactics, and their deal with trying to defund the IRS is so multimillionaires and billionaires don't get taxed.
Right.
That's the reason why they want to destroy the IRS.
Yeah.
And then right now with the Rogue Siskiyou forest, it's labeled a timber forest, so that's their main moneymaker is timber. And so if they can do away with all the people that do all the environmental checks when timber wants to come out and do cuts, these people we call them our specialists, and those are all like the ologists, and they survey the plots that want to be cut, and they ensure that they're not about to mow over some sensitive habitat for animals or water or anything like that. And so if they do away with those people and then do away with the NEPA and environmental checks, then they can just go through and just destroy public lands and make a lot of money themselves. These huge multinational timber companies, they'll make millions and billions, and then just leave our public lands decimated, and won't return to what they are currently, which is still from mismanaged, unsustainable logging. Even now, from the past 100 years, that our forest health is still in pretty bad shape as they are currently. And if they go in and do what they want to do, it'll just destroy it completely. And it'll be hundreds of years, if ever, that they're brought back, like within, our lifetime.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's actually, one of the things that is worrying me when I look at the kind of the whole thematic thing going on, that the destruction to all of our services, all of the underpinnings, all of the safety nets, all of everything, the damage that's being done, I don't know how we come back from it. I mean, I don't, the safety nets that you and I have talked about, Diana, before, about, during COVID, we found out how really not very good they were.
I think a lot of us knew, but there's so many metaphors for the safety net, the social safety net, and our social determinants of health, which for people who don't know it's the environment in which we work, live, play, worship, whatever, that makes up our health. And you can actually determine a group of people's health outcomes by their zip code. That's how critical our social determinants of health and how telling that they are. And that also includes our forests and natural resources. It includes our schools, and it includes our social services and hospitals and things like that. So, and cutting services, I know they're saying, it's about the budget and it's about saving money, but it's actually a decision about like who gets to live safely and who doesn't. And so it affects us all in a way that I know most people don't see because we don't understand necessarily social determinants of health. But when COVID hit, it was kind of like, well, talking about the safety net. The safety net is there to catch people essentially falling off the cliff. So we build the safety net. There's holes in it. We try to patch those holes, but then eventually we try to figure out why people are so close to the cliff. And then we try to figure out how to keep them away from the cliff. And then we figure out why some people are still slipping through. And so there's a lot of work that goes into building infrastructure for services. And, in Jackson County, they've done pretty well at pulling people away from the cliff. And they're now determining how they can get even farther upstream from that. Here, we were working with a couple of threads is what we had. Everybody was on the cliff. COVID hit. And I've talked about this before, when typically what we see for services pre-COVID is, we see a lot of chronic homelessness, and then we see some acute homelessness, which is people who haven't been homeless before, first time homeless or second time, but they really don't have any experience with being homeless. And homelessness is just one aspect. Obviously, you can still have a home and be struggling. And so we also see a lot of that here, because there are people who live in, a lot of seniors who, bought their trailers and that are now dilapidated or not in good shape. And so we also consider that to be homeless. It's, living in a place not meant for human habitation.
Right.
And so
it's probably not safe.
Not safe.
Yeah.
Again, especially for our seniors
Right.
with mobility issues. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a trailer with a rotting floor and somebody in a wheelchair trying to get around that. It's pretty awful here. So what we saw was, we did pretty good as a community about keeping some people from falling off because we're such a small community. So sometimes that really helps. But when an sort of exterior disaster happens, which obviously the pandemic was,
Right.
and it pushes all of everybody's safety nets to the max, then people fall off and they fall through. And so what we saw was a lot of first-time homelessness. There were so many people already on the edge, and then you cut away at a resource, or you restrict people in some way, or you create a financial disturbance for people, and then it's just, I don't know if you've ever seen those coin machines where you try to there's a bunch of coins on the ledge and you try to put a coin in and it pushes more off wherever your coin goes. So it was like that. It just was like one thing fell and then people just fell off the edge. And so that's a lot of what we saw. And this feels not dissimilar to that, because even though, it is global, it's creating a global unrest as well. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing the buildup of people getting to the edge again, people who've never been on the edge. And one of the most interesting and yet heartbreaking parts about COVID and seeing all of the first-time homelessness is, and this is also something we've talked about, where people live in a state of ignorance, not knowingly usually, about what resources are available. Like I've heard people say, well, there's resources for veterans if they want to get off the street. There's this and there's that. And those things don't actually exist. You can't convince people they don't exist. They just have to feel it. And so we just have to keep working through to build it, even though other people still think it already exists. And then when they themselves are in need, that's when they see it and feel it. So we would have people come in, and this also speaks to how we talk about poverty and how we talk about people in poverty and addiction and homelessness. When people would come in, they'd say, I'm not like this. And we'd be like what? And they're like, well, I'm not like everybody else. I'm only here and I'm only on the brink of homelessness because of X, Y, and Z. Yep. And we're like, yeah, that's everybody. Most people are not there of their own accord. In fact, all of the people that I work with, there are some pretty strong, clear lines from their childhood situation to where they are now. So I can't say anybody is there of their own accord. But yeah, so when people would come in, they'd say, this isn't me. I'm not like this. And that right there just speaks to how we degrade and talk about people in poverty. And so they don't see themselves as that.
Right.
And when you don't see yourself as that, you're less likely to support initiatives that fill those gaps.
And it seems like it's so easy to blame the victims, right? You see, homeless on the street and you decide in your head that they want to be homeless. Mm-hmm. Because if they didn't want to be homeless, they would do something different. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand. Obviously, they don't know that person's story and history and how they got there, but there also is like this, I don't want to understand it. I don't want to know that it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm. Well, that comes from top down. People, this is a difficult dynamic, but during COVID, we saw our mayor step up in a way that we didn't see a lot of local elected officials do. It surprised me.
Yep. We're talking about Jake.
Mm-hmm, we're talking about Jake, yeah. And really stepped up, took it seriously, mm-hmm. Didn't allow the rhetoric, shot that stuff down when people were going crazy, all QAnon off to the side. Yep. He was like, no, this is what we're doing. This is what the federal government's saying that we're supposed to do. And so this is what we're going to do. And that affected people. Like it brought people together because it shut down the argument. And so it does come from top down. You have to build this into the system. And so the rhetoric on our national level around addiction and homelessness, while it's not very loud right now, because right now they're focused on immigration, they're focused on all of these legal aid organizations and, shutting down aid for other countries. It's really about others right now they're focused on. But the rhetoric, nonetheless, is that people in addiction and people in homelessness and people in poverty chose to be there. Yep. And are making poor choices.
Right.
And, we know that some people make good choices and some people have good choices. So I think that...
And some people who have the ability and the circumstances to make good choices make bad ones.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, really, it isn't because you're poor that you make a bad decision.
No, and I mean, this is obviously a much larger conversation, but even in just talking about addiction, I think that the idea is that people who use drugs are bad. When the reality is I'm not even talking about alcohol or nicotine, but it's roughly 50% of our country that uses some form of substance. But we don't have 50% addiction rates. So there's clearly underlying issues there. So when we're working on social safety nets, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those underlying issues that I think people know that are there, but they don't connect them to homelessness and addiction.
And I think that, people also don't really deal with the reality that taking aspirin for pain is you're medicating. You are medicating.
Well, and when I say 50% of the country taking substances, I don't mean over the counter. I mean typically illegal substances.
50%, that's a lot. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And yet I'm not surprised.
No, I mean, well, and certainly if you included alcohol in there, it would be obviously a lot more because that's pretty
Or
socially
cigarettes.
acceptable.
Or,
Well, cigarettes, that would probably cover
yeah.
the rest.
Right? And aspirin, because, I mean, come on. You are medicating you are trying to remove your pain when you take aspirin or, ibuprofen or whatever. And I mean, seriously, a lot of the addiction starts with just wanting to not be in pain.
Well, and I read recently that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection, which makes a lot of sense to me. But in just, bringing it back to this, when they're cutting these nonprofits, when they're cutting our federal systems, when they're cutting all of the safety nets that we sometimes don't even know are there. I mean, I don't know that most people think about just in their day-to-day what, Sean's out there doing in the forest or what I'm out here doing in Curry County. You just hear snippets, or if something bad happens, that's when you hear about it usually. But when our systems fail, it's not just like the vulnerable people who suffer, it's everybody. And so I don't think people know what's coming. Some of us do, and I think we're trying to wave the flag, but I don't know how you get the rest of people to engage.
And part of the safety net is Social Security. And, you both are entirely too young to actually have to draw on Social Security, but you're paying it. And for that, some of us are very grateful. That you are
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're paying your way in. But there are quite a few of us, and especially in this community, who are old enough that we are, in fact, collecting Social Security. And for many of us, it is our only income. Many of us. And the idea that DOGE, in its infinite wisdom, wants to go after Social Security, that the House Republicans actually want to, go after Social Security so they can fund all those tax benefits for the wealthy. It is like, really what you're talking about is signing people's death warrants. Because those people, the hundreds of thousands of people whose only income is Social Security, they have nothing. You take that Social Security away and they have nothing. Nothing. And a lot of them don't own their own homes. A lot of them have no real assets. They are living hand to mouth, some in those trailers with the rotting floors,
And they're going to come to agencies like ours, and we're going to have no funding at that point. And so it's not even dominoes. It's sort of like cutting the base of all the trees. Like we're all going to fall at once.
Yeah.
And so it's really, a lot. Some of us can see that. Some of us can see what's coming. And like I said, it's not about efficiency. It's really about deciding who gets to live comfortably and live a healthy life and who doesn't. And I think right now, that's most of us on the ground. That's the 99% is who's going to lose the ability to live comfortably.
And it makes no sense. I mean, it really, if you actually care about logic, and you actually care about whether things make sense or not, it makes no sense to kneecap 80%, 90% of your population. I mean, it just doesn't. In what universe does that make any sense?
So
In an oligarchy.
yeah.
Right, right? Because I want it that way, so it's going to be.
So they're talking about, you're talking about in this budget, the budget they're trying to pass is they're trying to cut Social Security. Yeah. And Medicaid as well, is my understanding.
Yep.
Like $800 billion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. And it's like so I think where they're at in the process, the first part of it was deciding which kind of section of the government had to cough up some money, but not specifically what programs were going to get cut. But I think now they're in the phase where they are
Well, there's
starting.
no way to not cut something from each of those programs.
Exactly.
With the amount of money that they're... I think, like, as a country, we're maybe not quite, but it feels like we're at a bit of an impasse where, you know, it was the 1935 when Medicare and Social Security were enacted, 1965 when Medicaid came into play. And during those years, the national understanding was that we need to take care of old people, we need to take care of sick people. And then when Medicaid, it was we need to take care of our families and our children. And so somewhere past 1965, we've lost that desire as a society to help the less fortunate. Like what I hear now is, you know, about people who, of course, they don't ever say like, to point to one person and say, yeah, this senior doesn't deserve that. It's just the
Yes.
royal they.
Yes.
But they have faces, and it's like literally all of us. And so I don't know how we get back to that place where, I mean, it took a disaster. It took the Depression for, and then World War II for us to come out and be like, no, we need to take care. Our seniors are dying on the streets, and people with disabilities are dying. And so that's what caused all of these things, and we've forgotten all that. And I'd like to think we would come back to that before people start dying again, but it feels like no. It feels like that's where we're headed.
It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's another systemic problem again
Yeah.
of, you know, back in the 30s, 40s, you know, the CEO pay was about 100%, 200% above what their average worker was. And of course, there were benefits like, you know, either a pension or 401k and then, you know, health care, where all that's wiped out now. And you're lucky to even get a 401k in most jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEO pay is now like at 1,500%
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
the average.
Yep.
And yet our productivity rate is like through the roof. But yet us, the workers that are creating all this
Right.
productivity
Right.
are just,
Way underpaid.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that like kind of feeds into when people, you know, now and for a while now, for decades, have been living paycheck to paycheck or not even making it, you know, being in debt every paycheck. And then if they ever have any issue at all that comes up, any kind of medical issue, and they have no insurance,
Yep.
or, you know, and then they're on streets from one incident,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and so like, yeah.
I was reading something the other day that said that we can kind of trace the change in attitude back to Ronald Reagan, who was a cowboy, and that's how he got elected, was on that kind of independent macho man cowboy image. And up until then, we were a lot more focused on society and, you know, government helping and all that stuff. But that kind of rebirth of the Marlboro Man, you know, and it's been like that since then, that there's been this real push towards, you know, standing on your own and, you know, being independent and being able to do everything your own self and
Pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps.
pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the image of actually trying to pull it just,
I don't know if we've talked about it before, but the whole idea, the whole concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps used to be something they would say to mock people. who thought that they could do it by themselves.
Yeah.
And so they would joke and say that they were pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps and
Because you
pulling
can't.
themselves off the ground.
Right?
So it was a joke to
Yeah.
say, you can't do anything by yourself.
Right.
And we're not independent as a species. We're
But now
interdependent.
it's like the ideal. To pull yourself up by your own bootstraps is like the ideal.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with education as well.
For sure.
I think that, I say this every time I have the opportunity to say it, that we've been dumbing down our population for decades. And I think it's showing up in big ways. There's a group that I sometimes go online. It's a Brookings neighbor, I think.
Oh, gosh.
Right. And
Better you than me.
it was originally intended to be a place where neighbors could go online and help each other, right? I saw a cougar out in the yard and, stay away from blah, blah, blah. Or, we're looking at high tides coming in. Or, I have a great plumber and his name. But it has devolved into this just toxic right MAGA political stuff. And what I find really sad is that there's so many people who are posting stuff that is not true. They can't back it up because it's not actually factual. And they'll cite things like the Constitution when they clearly have never read it. They'll say, no, unless you're a citizen, you're not covered by the laws of this country. It's like,
It says all men, and well, we know that means all people, because I like to think I'm included in that as well.
Women like to think that, yes.
Yes, we do.
Don't be too entitled.
I know, exactly.
Gotta keep myself in check here.
But it's remarkable, that people feel like they're perfectly fine just coming out on social media and saying things that all it would take is 30 seconds to Google it to find out if what you're doing is blowing smoke or if you actually have the facts. And not even that, right? Not even...
That's been one of the really frustrating parts, I think, about I know this was happening before COVID, but everything all of the negative parts of society really blew up with COVID. And I think that was already festering during the first Trump administration. And so, there was already a lot of division happening. But one of the most frustrating things that happened during COVID was how even some of the most intelligent people that I know switched and were like, wow, we don't believe science anymore. And science that has gotten them to where they are medically. And so that's really difficult because I, as someone with a scientific background, I'm working on public health right now, but with some scientific background, I'm not really sure how else when you bring forward information that's been peer-reviewed and published by scientists, and that doesn't mean that everything that's peer-reviewed and published is the best information, for sure. There's times, certainly, where they recall certain stories and facts, but...
And Tesla trucks.
Right, that. Although I don't know that those were peer-reviewed, but sure, somebody's peer-reviewed them.
Somebody reviewed it.
But essentially, how, when they're saying, well, we don't believe that paper, how else do you determine, we're talking about studies, double-blind studies, independent fact-checkers. So how else do you determine what's fact? And so when that started happening, and the alternative facts started coming out, I think that's where I felt like there was such a big shift. And I don't know how we're going to get back to, because now people can just say, nuh-uh, and it's fact. And that doesn't make any sense to me.
No. It's like saying that gravity doesn't exist. Because
gravity exists?
You don't. Right? I know. I guarantee you it exists. You stand up and don't hold on to something, you're going to go down.
Yeah. So I don't know. Just a lot of the, like you were saying, the dumbing down of society. I think just to be able to say, no, you don't have to listen to facts anymore or science. And I don't mean like a lot of people have said that before, but for that to come from a president and an administration and leadership officials, because again, people in positions of leadership greatly affect what people think and say. It didn't create unity in that. It created a lot more division. And so I don't know how we get back together with facts.
No, I don't either, because there is such a division, you know.
But I do know that if we continue on this path, people will wake up and realize it. My concern is that it's going to be too late. You know, you can't replant an old growth tree.
Right.
You can't fix some of the damage that's going to be done environmentally, and that's going to affect everybody's health.
Yeah. And they're already saying that the damage that's been done to the financial system is they have no clue how to get back from that, because it's enormous. It's enormous. And it's more than just dollars and cents. It's that the rest of the world is looking at our country going, what? We can't trust you guys anymore.
These are not quick fixes or you know, simple mistakes that we made that we can backtrack. There's a lot of permanent damage.
You can't try to hold other countries in the world hostage to your desire to...
Such a weird time.
It's so weird. And to not understand, right, the whole thing about tariffs, to actually not understand what a tariff is. And this coming from the President of the United States, not understanding what a tariff is.
Yeah. I've taken three basic economics courses in my business degree. And I remember watching one of the interviews and thinking, like, I could do better than that.
No, I know. And I don't know how, you know, we get back from that feeling that the rest of the world has that we can't be trusted. Because that's what we're proving, is that we can't be trusted.
It's odd to think about traveling abroad now. Like, I didn't really think about it much before because I wasn't planning on doing it. But if I had thought about it before, being an American would have been a perk.
Absolutely.
And at this point, I'm not sure.
So much.
I'm gonna have to work on my Irish accent.
Well, you know, luckily, I think a lot of the people in the rest of the world understand that we are not happy about this. You know, we that's not us.
Well, the approval rating's like 25% or something.
It's awful.
So they must know that we don't.
Yeah, it's tanking. But I mean, seriously, to go after Canada? I don't even know what to say about that. Canadians are so polite. They're such nice people.
I heard they're so polite because they push all their anger into the geese.
I don't know. My daughter lives in Canada, and, you know, I've gone up there and visited her several times, and it's
because your son-in-law's Canadian.
And, well, neither one of them are Canadian.
Oh.
Yeah, because Andy's American as well. They both just moved to Canada years ago.
I didn't know that. I thought he would. Oh.
No, because he was offered a job at UBC, and it was like, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I'd go. I don't know if they'd have me now, but I'd go.
Yeah. No, they wouldn't have you. I mean, although I have heard that Canada is extending, what is it?
Asylum?
Yes. I've
we might
heard
need that soon.
I know, right? Because if we lose our Social Security, how do we stay in this country and exist? How do we do that?
I don't think that that's tenable. I think that something's going to happen if Social Security goes down. I mean, if Medicaid goes down for sure, but if Social Security goes down, I mean, there are a lot of angry old people.
And there are already. I mean, if you watch some of those town halls.
Yes.
I mean,
I went to the one here.
Did you? How did it go? Merkley, right?
Yeah, Merkley and Val Hoyle.
Mm-hmm.
It was very well attended. It was standing room only. They had overflow into the balcony. And aside from one ignorant question about trans issues, all of the questions were on point. And Merkley and Valhoyle handled themselves really well.
Great.
There was a lot of, I say it was positively charged, but I think if you were conservative and you were there, unless you were mad too, I don't think you would think it was positively charged. It was just charged in general.
Right.
But there was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration for sure, and then just a lot of people coming together too. So it was really nice to be there amongst, our kind.
Yes. And I think KCIW was there, and I think we did an interview.
Lori was there.
Yeah, so I think there's an interview up on our website.
I had my question ready but it was a lottery, and so I told Corey, I said, you should have put your name in the hat for one in case they called it. I could have asked I was so hoping to ask my question, and I didn't get a chance to, but I did send it by email to them. So.
What was your question?
My question was about the funding and what they were doing about the appropriated funding that because Congress appropriated those funds for states and nonprofits, and they're being frozen, even though they're not. They're still, some of the funds are still frozen. And so my question to Congress was, or to them was, what is Congress doing about the appropriated dollars?
Yep.
And how are they going to hold the administration accountable for that specifically? Because that is their job.
Yep.
So, but I didn't get to ask.
I mean, it's amazing that they are willing to give up their power.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's like you're supposed to be a co-equal branch, and
and one's giving it up, and the other one's having it taken away.
I mean, it's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. And he arrested a judge yesterday.
Yeah. I'm still waiting to.
I mean, who does that? Well, Hitler did it.
Yeah.
That's who does it.
I think it's, even if it was legitimate, I think we're all shocked at this point because, which I don't think it was legitimate, but even if it was, I think we're all just feeling like everything that they're doing is sabotaging. So,
So what does the future look like for Brookings CORE Response? We already know that we don't know what's happening with Sean.
He'll be there for maybe another few weeks. We don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or maybe more. You never know, right?
Yeah.
Because they might change their mind again.
Yeah.
How about CORE? How
well, I mean, we were already working we have a pretty diverse funding stream as it is. And so we're looking at other funding models as well, just so that we can shift if we need to. But to be honest, I mean, there really is no, just like for Sean, there really is no recourse for us. If all of that goes down, if funding is cut, we don't have any recourse. And so I hope that doesn't happen. It's scary to think about, even right now, just thinking about that, of all we've built in the last few years. And we're now the fiscal agent here in Curry County for Oregon Housing and Community Services. And so that's a huge step. So
yes, it is.
It's hard for me to think about all of that going away. So I'm working really hard with our finance team and our admin team to try to stabilize everything, but also bring in different sources of funding. It's just, it's not something that, we're not selling a service. We can't sell happiness and prosperity.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it is for nonprofit and government work is you're working for the people. We're a private agency working for the people, whereas, Sean's part of a public agency working for the people, but it's different than for-profit work. And so all the work we're doing is for the community.
Right.
And so any cuts is going to be hit hard. So it's hard for me to think about sometimes. It's hard for me to imagine, but we do talk about it regularly as an organization because that's the reality now. So for us, things are looking okay. We're seeing continued funding and promises of continued funding, but we're also talking about the what ifs and contingency plans. And we have some built-in contingency plans, but they wouldn't last very long. So it's stressful, and
it is very stressful because you just don't know which way we're gonna go. I keep thinking, well, it can't get any worse, right?
Now you sound like me.
And then
you told me I'm not allowed to say that anymore.
I know, because then it does get worse.
So you can say it and I can't.
No, although I think there should be something with age gets to do something.
Oh, sure. Okay.
You youngsters.
Sure. Okay.
But still, it's like literally every day. And, the assault on my brain it's significant.
I think
know?
that's why we have to keep talking about it too. Not just
I
to
do
vent
too.
and get it out.
No, I
but,
do too.
You know, at some point this is going to change.
It has
so
to.
we have to keep our sanity for
Right.
that long.
And I think part of the way we keep our sanity is that we talk about it. And maybe that also goes towards helping other people see it.
Mm-hmm.
People who don't want to see it, don't want to acknowledge where we're going. If we keep talking about it and they keep hearing it, I mean, sooner or later, their Social Security checks are going to stop.
Yeah.
And they're going to be wondering why.
Yeah. Like, we got to uncover the lies.
Yes,
You know, like,
we do.
and
Yep.
because that's the only thing that's going to defeat this assault.
Yes, exactly.
the
And
word.
and they keep coming,
Mhm.
those lies.
Mhm.
And like, you know, you really can't deport 2-year-old kids, I'm sorry, who are citizens.
Yeah.
All right, so we're out of time. See how fast that goes. I mean, it is kind of amazing how fast it goes. But Diana Carter, Sean Cosgrove, it's been a real pleasure having both of you on the show today. It really has.
Thank you.
So delightful. Diana, you know you have a standing invitation to come back anytime to keep us updated about Brookings CORE Response. And Sean, I hope you keep
Invite
your
only?
job. You one time only and you're done. I hope you keep your job.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'd like to hear more about what you
Sure,
do.
yeah.
You know, what it looks like when you go out there and you're whacking your way through,
Yeah.
you know, with the machete,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. There's a lot happening, both here in our little corner of the world and farther afield. We need to stay informed about what's being done in our names, because that's what government of, by, and for the people demands of us. And silence is complicity. I'm Candice Michel, and this is Our Community.
The opinions expressed here are those of the individual participants. Curry Coast Community Radio takes no position on issues discussed in this program.